Welcome to the E-commerce Profits Podcast, where we feature top founders and experts in the e-commerce industry and take an in-depth look at the struggles and successes in growing e-commerce brands profitably.
Josh Chin here. I'm the host of the E-commerce Profits Podcast, where we feature top experts in the e-com industry and we go behind the scenes of the struggles and successes in growing a brand. Now, this episode is brought to you by Chronos.agency. If you're a direct-to-consumer e-com brand that's ready for next-level growth and to unlock the optimal lifetime value of your customers through email marketing, Chronos is your company. We've helped hundreds of brands get over $70 million in return from email alone, and our clients get an average of 3,500% ROI from our efforts. We've worked with brands like Truly Beauty, Elias Skin, The Udi, and many more. And if you're interested in finding out more, the next step is just to email us at sales@chronos.agency, or you can find out more at chronos.agency. And today we have something that's really unique and different. We have two amazing guests with me. My first guest, Benton Crane, is the CEO of Harmon Brothers, whose advertisements are responsible for over 1.5 billion views on the internet and over $400 million in revenue generated. In fact, you've probably seen most of their advertisements. Harmon Brothers are the masterminds behind advertising campaigns for Lumi deodorant, one of your recent successes, Poo Pourri, Squatty Potty, Purple Mattress, FiberFix, ChatBooks, and many, many more. And my second guest today, Jason Portnoy, is the founder and CEO of JPORT Media, a full-service digital marketing agency helping businesses unlock their potential online. Now, Jason is also a host of one of my most favorite podcasts, Perfectly Mentored, a podcast designed to be your in-pocket mentor. He has featured amazing guests such as Gary Vaynerchuk, Daymond John, Cardone, and Ryan Deiss, among many, many other legends. Guys, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think there's a mistake listening to Benton's bio and then listen to mine after. I think he should be on here all by himself. I'm here to listen to him now.
No, absolutely not. So Jason's just being super humble here, but I think you guys are doing some incredible work in the space. And personally, I look up to both of you on a lot of the things that you do. Jason, you're a great host, and Benton, you have built an amazing agency and business. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about what has gotten you guys here. And I think the path to success is often built upon, well, obviously the shoulders of giants. And so my question to you guys is, who are your mentors? Who are your key mentors that you attribute the most of your success to? And this goes out to both of you guys. Jason can start first, and then Benton.
Great question. Yeah, look, I think mentorship's extremely important. That's why I have a podcast called Perfectly Mentored, because I believe that everyone should have access to a mentor. And I try to bring, pick the brains of some of the smartest people on the planet and bring it to everyone. I'm fortunate enough that when I started my clothing brand, I had an amazing mentor in Daymond John, who I became super close with and friends with. That's a lot of luck to get your first mentor, be someone like that who saved me tons of money and mistakes. He's someone I look up to and have just so much respect for. I've seen him behind the scenes and I've seen him on the show. The guy has an incredible work ethic. I don't know if I have at each level or at each crossroad that I get to. I'm always looking for someone else that could help me in a different way. So I'm not tied down to one mentor. I learn a lot from different people. I learn a lot from you. I learn a lot from Benton and what he does with his company. There's just so many people I pick and choose from. But obviously, I think number one would be, it sounds like a cheesy answer, but my parents, right? Because they've always been my biggest fan. They've recognized that I march to a different beat, and to the beat of my own drum, and they've always, maybe not always, they fought me in the beginning, but I think now they've always tried to give me that space and let me figure things out on my own. But yeah, I don't think there's one in particular. I keep learning every single day, and I'm a sponge.
I love that. What about you, Benton?
I love reading. I read a lot of books, and so oftentimes I feel like my best mentors are authors. A couple of that pop into my head. Simon Sinek, who wrote "Start with Why," that had a massive impact on our company. Ed Catmull, co-founder of Pixar, wrote "Creativity Inc." That impacted us deeply in how we think about creativity and how we do things at Harmon Brothers. And then, a personal mentor of mine is Paul Allen. He actually goes by Paul Allen the Lesser because it's not the Microsoft Paul Allen. It's the Ancestry.com Paul Allen. So he's the co-founder of Ancestry. And he's one of those guys who, has a wealth of experience and a lot of successes under his belt. And he doesn't mind a phone call from me here and there so that I can pick his brain and throw some hard problems at him. And if he doesn't have the answers, he can usually point me to someone who does. So it's nice to have a guy like that in your court.
Now, here comes a really typical question. How do you find a mentor in the first place? Now, do you think it's more by chance, or is it kind of through a methodological process? Or something else, right? I don't want to kind of box you up there.
Good. Go ahead, Jason. It sounds like you have a little more expertise and background in mentorship.
I mean, look, I think everyone wants the big name people as mentors. And I'll tell you this much, that a lot of times they're the wrong mentors for the people of what they're going through. A lot of times what people say are not relatable to, depending on where you're at in your business. Someone who's doing 9 figures a year doesn't really remember as much, or doesn't know what it takes to really start from scratch right now. They could tell you about their story and help, but you may want to find someone who's just a level above you. Same way when you're looking for a business coach or a coach in anything, you want someone who's the level above you, or can grow with you and keep getting there, or otherwise you have to keep finding a new coach. But I think you have to I would start local. I would find someone that in your network who has done something that you've achieved. And these people usually don't get hit up a lot for mentorships, right? Because they're local, they're not a big name, and reach out to them. But I think you have to go into mentorship to find a mentor. You have to go into it with what value can you bring them as well. If you're just, hey, can I just borrow? Can I just have or steal an hour of your time? Many people won't want that, right? People are very busy these days. And they don't want to just give an hour. So find what way you could offer value, whether it's helping out, find a way to learn from them. Sometimes you have if you're an employee, sometimes you have the most amazing mentor right in your boss, and you don't even realize it, right? You're looking for external, but you have it right under your nose. Sometimes it could be a family member. I would just it sounds great to be like, oh, I have Daymond John as a mentor. It was great. It's lucky, there was a lot of stars that aligned for that to happen. But if starting again, I'd probably find someone, and I've had amazing mentors local that were in the clothing business that took me under their wing when Daymond John was too busy, right? And I'm not going to bother him every 10 minutes. That took me under their wing, that knew the industry just as well. So that's number one. I would sit there and say, who in my local market is doing exactly what I want to be doing, and how can I get in front of them?
That makes so much sense.
The one thing I would add is mentorship doesn't need to be formal. You don't need to go to someone and say, hey, will you be my mentor? And make it sound like some big commitment or something, because it's not. Just if you have a question, ask the question. And as a general rule, entrepreneurs are more than happy to share the lessons that they've learned. And when somebody asks for help or advice, people are usually happy to give it. So just keep it low key, keep it informal. And in fact, usually you don't even realize you're in a mentor relationship until later. You're looking back at it and you're like, oh yeah, they mentored me on this. But at the time, you don't even think of it that way.
Yeah. And exactly. Sometimes your mentor won't even know they're a mentor to you, right? You'll be like, hey, this guy mentored me. And he's like, yeah, okay, thanks. right?
Yep. And I think that the key is to keep things as, like Benton, you mentioned, just as informal as possible. Keep it lightweight and easy on the guy, so that, it's easy for someone to kind of help you out when there's no kind of formal, I guess, like contract per se to sign. So moving on to my next question here, I kind of want to move into how you guys view the landscape of ecom and strategy in ecom. What do you see brands doing wrong, that, especially high growth brands, right? Especially transitioning from like 7 figures to 8 figures. When do you see them doing this, like anything in particular that you go, I wish I could be there and change that thing that they're doing? What is that thing to you?
So from my perspective, brands and just people in general tend to think really binary about the type of advertising that they do. And they generally fall into one of two camps. It's either direct response advertising, which is the in your face, hurry, buy now while supplies last, direct tracked, I only care about ROI, that style of advertising. Yep. Versus the other side of the spectrum, which is, your traditional branding stuff that you see from an Apple or a Nike. It's the type of stuff you see in Super Bowl ads, right? And I'm not exactly sure what drives it, but people have a really hard time blending those two worlds. And instead they think very binary about it. They're like, okay, we're all direct response. We're a direct response company. Or, yuck, we don't like direct response. That doesn't fit our brand. So we're 100% traditional branding. And I feel like very few companies can long-term successfully live in only one of those camps. So a couple of examples. Snuggie is one of the most successful infomercials of all time. Depending on what source you read, they sold somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 to $500 million worth of Snuggies, just using infomercials, which by all accounts is wildly successful, right? $300 to $500 million, that's enormous. But when you take a step back and say, where is Snuggie today? Who knows, right? I don't even know if they're still around, and the upcoming generation has never even heard of them. And so then I have to step back and scratch my head, and I'm like, how do you do $300 to $500 million of sales and never bothered to build a brand? Like, never bothered to build something that stands the test of time and becomes memorable and develops a family of products so that, it becomes a household name where any home that you go into, they have several Snuggie products around. No, they didn't bother at all. And that's because they only thought of themselves as direct response, and they never graduated into thinking about building a brand for the long haul. And you can find hundreds of examples that go the opposite direction. What I think about pets.com, which is like the famous bust story from, the collapse of the .com bubble. But if you look at what they did, they're, this new startup selling pet supplies online. They're looking at Amazon and saying, okay, Amazon did it with books, so we can do it with pet supplies. And they go and they raise several $1 million from VC investors. And the first thing they do is they go and buy Super Bowl ads. And, brand new startup, and they're buying Super Bowl ads. And that's an example of thinking binary. Once again, they're going straight into this. Hey, we want to be a brand. We want to play with the big boys. We want to act like the big boys. And so we're going to go buy Super Bowl ads. And they skipped kind of that whole phase of thinking about, okay, how do we get, direct track conversions? How do we get a return on ad spend, all of those things. And there's hundreds of other examples like that. But in either case, when you think binary, you're not setting yourself up for long-term success. And so that's the number one mistake that I see companies and entrepreneurs making. And so if I could give one piece of advice, it's that think of those two worlds as a spectrum. And depending on where your company is at, you're somewhere on that spectrum, and you should always be growing and moving across that spectrum. So of course, when you're a brand new startup, think about direct track conversion, think about return on ad spend, because that's what keeps the lights on. That's how you make payroll. But over time, if you get stuck there, once you get past $10 million per year, and then you're going up into $20, $30, $40 million per year. If you're not thinking really seriously about building a brand, then you're going to have a really short lifespan and a really short runway, kind of like Snuggie. Snuggie was like 3 to 5 years, wildly successful during that time, but then they faded into obscurity.
Makes sense. I think the sequencing is super important. And I think you mentioned this on your LinkedIn, one of your LinkedIn posts as well. Sales pays the bills and branding ensures your future. I think that's a perfect summary of what that is. Jason, do you have anything to add from a paid media perspective in terms of, we come from the world of direct response first, right? Making sure that there's an ROI in everything that we do with marketing. How do you kind of blend that in with the whole branding aspect of media?
I mean, there's not much more to add to what Benton said. I agree. I think that is the number one mistake. I think, brands that are growing, that are hit the 7-figure mark, they're still looking for immediate ROIs, and they need an ROI to everything, and they're so ROI focused versus how do I grow this out? How do I get that lifestyle? How do I get that longevity that Benton was talking about? That's so important, because at some point to really build, like, think about the biggest brands. Some things they do just aren't like, there's no ROI to it. Like, it's not like there's no measurable ROI to it, but it's the right move to do, right? Like, what's the ROI to customer service? But we know customer service is needed, right? But you can't really track that. There's no real tracking for a direct ROI to that. I think in the beginning,
it's no immediate and direct trackable ROI, right? Definitely an ROI overall.
Yes, correct. But I'm saying, like, on paper, day one, like, we've been spoiled. Look, paid media is getting a big change right now, right? We're seeing what's happening with iOS, iOS 14.4, and we're going to see a cookieless web by 2022, they're saying. So a lot of the spoiledness that we've been getting in paid media, and I started paid media before, when we had to manually calculate return on ad spends and a lot of these metrics, we're getting hit with a lot of, like, we've been spoiled the last few years. If you're a brand, if you're an agency, if you're an advertiser, we've been really spoiled with getting instant data, instant numbers, and needing to build off of that. That's not how you really build a brand. So you have to ask yourself, do you want short-term sales? Do you want to just make as much money now as possible and be as profitable as possible right now? Or do you want to build something that's going to last and stand the test of time? And there's no right or wrong answer. If you don't want that, you don't want that. If you're not interested in building a brand, you sell iPhone cases, you're not getting repeat customer rates of 60%. So you need to sell, and you need to be profitable. But like Benton said, I think that's the biggest mistake, I think. And as I love the reverse of going too much on branding and not focusing on direct response. But I would actually say, from my line of work, the biggest thing is actually the other way that you started with always needing an ROI and not focusing enough on branding. And as you see, cookieless web, creative, branding, that's how you're gonna. It's the difference between outliving and outspending your competition, in my opinion.
You know what, this reminds me of, talking about initiatives and just things that are not immediately ROI focused. Amazon they produced an amazing video, I believe titled "The Show Must Go On" during, like, the early stages of COVID.
That. I loved that.
That was incredible. And there was literally no call to action, nothing. It was just a good video. And that, intuitively, because it has emotional intelligence. But from a branding perspective, it makes sense. But from an ROI perspective, for Amazon to spend, like, I would presume, millions of dollars producing that and distributing that, that's insane. What do you think is that thought process behind brands like Deiss? And what are some of your favorite examples of brands doing it really right, really well?
So look, you have your Amazons of the world, your Apples of the world, your Nikes of the world. Of course, these guys, you're never going to see, a call to action in one of their ads that's like, click now while supplies last, or, hurry, learn more. That's just, you're not going to see that from them. And those brands have all reached a level and a size where they don't have to think that way. They have the luxury of they can afford to be ever present in our lives, and so they can afford to be subtle and I guess much softer and less in your face with their approach. But to Jason's point, we don't start there. We as entrepreneurs, we have to start scrappy and lean, and we've got to figure out how to pay the bills. And so it's okay for us to think much more salesy, much more direct focus. But where the graduation needs to start to happen is, once you're, I would call it kind of like, that $10 million per year range. If you're a $10 million per year company and everything you think about is still direct response, then you haven't even started to make that shift and changed your way of thinking, and you're going to limit yourself, and you're going to limit your company. But that still doesn't mean you have to jump all the way to let's do it like Amazon, where we just put out a feel good message. You can still blend those worlds. You can start to think about things like brand character, brand voice. Do we want to engage humor? Do we want to engage, more of a feel good vibe? And you can start to build those elements into your campaigns, but still have them continue with your direct response elements, things like problem, solution, build credibility, overcome concerns. And that blend is kind of where we've made a name for ourselves. And if you go and look back at, our most famous campaigns from whatever, Purple Mattresses, Squatty Potty, Poo Pourri, whatever, go analyze those ads and you'll see that they contain both. All of the emotional elements that make a great branding campaign, the shareability, the conversation piece that gets people to talk about it, gets people to share it, gets people to, to comment and all that stuff. It's all there, but so is the sales structure. And so you can absolutely build a really nice bridge between the two worlds and gradually work your way across that bridge. And hopefully we all get to the point where we're like Amazon or Nike, and we get the luxury to just do the really fun. I love watching Super Bowl ads, and it's as much fun as the game. And it's because those are the brands that have reached that point where they have the luxury to just do the really fun branding pieces.
Jason, you mentioned the recent change in iOS 14. What do you foresee is going to be the future of paid media as a growing brand, especially in that transition that Benton just mentioned, right? Reaching that 10 mil mark and starting to think about branding versus direct response and on a spectrum.
So I actually think, Benton's being a bit generous with the 10 million mark. I think it should happen a lot sooner. I think even if you're doing six figures, I think some of your budget needs to be spent on getting your brand out there. It doesn't mean you have to be like, maybe 10% of the budget gets spent on building your brand out there. Because I think the biggest mistake people do in online marketing is they throw out real world sales tactics, right? You don't walk into a bar and scream, buy my product to everyone. You build a relationship, you start talking about it, people figure out who you are, what you do, and then you develop a relationship, and then you do business. And, in online marketing, we just think, okay, broad, throw it out to everyone, throw it out there, yell as loud as I can, try to yell over the next person and see what happens. And I don't think that's the way to do it. I think you have to build that relationship with your consumer. And it starts with them knowing who you are. And Ben talked about spending ads on Super Bowls. And, there's a reason why AT&T buys sports arenas. Obscurity is the biggest reason why brands disappear or fail, right? One is if they don't know you exist, they can't do business with you. And then if they forget you exist, if you don't keep reminding them that you're there, they're going to forget to keep doing business with you, right? They won't keep doing business with you. Doesn't mean you have to go buy a sports arena and raise your money and the first thing you do is buy a sports arena, but that's the reason why they do it. That's the reason why they run these feel good ads, because they don't care. They just want the impressions. They just want always be top of mind for you. And you get to a point where that could happen. But a lot of these people also run direct response, or they built a relationship where they don't have to be direct response, right? That's building a lifestyle brand. When you get to that level, you don't have to be in your face. We just have to remind you that we're there and you're going to keep shopping with us. That's a whole different level to get to. But yeah, when it comes to paid media, the future of it is it's going to come down to building a community around your brand, about building a brand, about how good your creatives are going to be. To give Benton and his team credit, I think one of the best commercials you've ever done was the ChatBooks one. Talk about building a brand and transformational selling. Like it's so subtle. Like from a marketing perspective, if you're a marketer, go YouTube that commercial. And look at it and then break it down and understand that mother, what she's saying in every single thing is a pain point with a solution, but it's so subtle with humor, with different ways to like reset and snap you out of it because it's a long commercial, right? And after like 10 seconds, our attention span starts going, but there's so many subtle ways, like the arrow flying out. Like I could break that commercial down into a course in itself. And it's brilliant. And that's the type of creative people need. That's the type of, what people need to focus on. That's building a brand. That's building direct response. That's doing both. And then you have retargeting. You could retarget anyone who watched that video with a bit more direct response. But the future, I think, is going to be less on immediate ROI. And I think brands need to start looking at MER structure and not what channel is producing the biggest ROI, what channel is producing. How much of our budget are we willing to spend on advertising? Okay, 25%. All right, we're spending 25% of our money on advertising. Advertising costs versus revenue in. Are we profitable? Yes, cool, let's keep going. We're not profitable? Okay, now let's zoom in on the channels and see what's going on. Where's our best channel? What do we see most traffic coming from? How do we figure out that way? Because once we stop being able to track and get immediate ROIs, we're going to have to measure it some other way, right? Like you don't just turn off Facebook ads because you can't track it anymore when you know it represents 70% of your business, right? That's not going to go away. It just won't be trackable. It won't be like direct in your face, but doesn't mean you kill it. It just means we have to start looking at it from a more holistic point of view and sitting there saying, how do I build that community and how do I build that brand? And frankly, it's something I preached for years, even while we were spoiled with this. And I'm kind of excited for it because I think you're going to see a lot of the digital marketers now who don't understand marketing and they just are really good at manual bid strategies or different bidding strategies. They're going to be finished. They're out, right? If you don't understand how to market, how to really dissect what your consumer wants, how to write good copy, how to write transformational advertisements like Benton and his team do, transformational selling, you're going to have a really, really tough time.
No, you mentioned lifestyle products. Sarah, Benton, go ahead. Do you have anything else to add there?
Yeah. I want to share an opinion on this, iOS 14 change that's coming down the pipeline. I think it's really interesting because, iOS or Apple is kind of leading the charge on this. They're coming out with iOS 14 and they're severely limiting trackability, particularly cross-platform trackability, which, to Jason's point, is going to make a direct response advertiser's job much, much harder because the granularity of what they can track is going to be greatly reduced. And at first glance, you would think that when that happens, that would really hurt Facebook because, Facebook has built its whole business on that type of advertising. But this is what's interesting. Facebook is adapting its platform to fall in line with what iOS is doing. And then they're applying it to their whole entire system, including Android, which to date, Android hasn't gotten to that same level of, stopping the tracking, but Facebook is going to do it anyways. And so when you actually step back and say, why would Facebook do that? Why would Facebook take away that level of tracking for, roughly 50% of the market, which is Android? And here's my opinion on it. I really believe what this comes down to is when you think empathetically in the shoes of the viewer, what does the viewer want to see? What does the viewer want to experience? I think as an industry, we've let the pendulum swing too far towards, that direct sales in your face, shove it down your throat. And I think Facebook sees that. And I think that because as an industry, we've gone too far that direction, people's experience in the news feed has been degraded by just constantly being bombarded, with these hyper targeted, hyper focused, direct sales type ads. And so Facebook realizes that it's actually in their best interest to let that pendulum swing back a little bit, to focus more on brand messages that are more empathetic toward the end viewer. And I think that's really, really important for us to think about as advertisers and content creators. Way back in our early history, my partner Jeff Harmon was launching a campaign for Aura Brush, which was a tongue cleaner that gets rid of bad breath. And this was right after Google had bought YouTube. Oh, you've got it. You have it right there. Nice.
Right there, yeah.
So what was so fascinating about this was that he made the spot 2.5 minutes long, which is like a total oddball length. Normally you're like 30 or 60 seconds for television, or you're like full infomercial. And he had this 2.5 minute ad, and everyone's like, no, it doesn't work. You can't do a 2.5 minute spot. And he goes to YouTube and says, can you give me a skip button so that people who want to see this can, and people who don't want to see it can skip it? And YouTube, at this point, they had just barely purchased, Google had barely purchased YouTube. And so they're acting like a startup. They're scrappy, they're experimenting, they're trying to figure out how to make it an ad platform. And they're like, sure, no problem. We'll give it a try. And so they build the skip button. And that one little innovation ended up changing the whole entire industry, because now instead of advertisers being able to force feed whatever crap they want to the viewer, now all of a sudden the viewer has the power to skip things they don't want to see. And so that forced advertisers to start thinking empathetically and say, what can I give that adds value? What can I give that the viewer actually wants to spend their time and their focus on? And that was huge, huge, huge. And I believe that's exactly what's happening right now with this iOS 14 change is, as advertisers, we have to stop saying like, how can I squeeze every last penny out of the viewer this instant? Instead, how can I provide value so that the viewer voluntarily gives their time and their attention and their focus?
It's interesting that I've never heard that perspective before, that you think it's actually going to help the end user. I'm not personally, I'm not too sure about that, because your experience is based off all the data Facebook has on you, right? So whatever you scroll through, chances are you somehow express some sort of interest in it. I mean, yes, there are the weird targeting things, but what happens when you live in California, you start seeing ski ads or things that don't apply to you, and your user feed is filled with things that don't apply to you because now there is no hyper targeting anymore. I agree with you though. I think internet marketers came in and ruined everything and really took advantage of things, and the pendulum did shift way too much. But I'm curious whether it actually swings back down that way, and what the user feed is going to be like. And the next thing is, I'm also worried about small businesses, like the ones that aren't doing 7 figures, the ones that don't have big budgets to spend on branding and getting it out there. And they relied on being able to be hyper targeted in order to build their brand or build their business. I'm worried more about them. And let's not pretend Apple's doing this for the sake of privacy, right? They're keeping that privacy for themselves. They're keeping all the data for themselves, which, I mean, do they invent their own ad platform at one point because they have all the data? But like, they're not just doing it for the sake of just, hey, we think everyone should be entitled to their data, right? They're still keeping all of it, which is one thing that doesn't get in. And I think Facebook just did a lousy PR battle on it. In my opinion, they kept going after, Apple and not talking exactly about how it affects the end users and why people should actually, opt in versus opt out. They're going after attacking. I think it was a bad PR move, but it's just interesting perspective. I just haven't heard it. I come from the mindset that I think it will actually make user experience worse, but I've never really heard it the other way.
All right. So my next question goes out to Benton. So before we started recording, you mentioned that one of your dream clients is Tesla, and actually all 3 of us are fans of Tesla. Unfortunately, we don't have Teslas yet on mass production in Singapore, but they have a very interesting model wherein it's like a lifestyle brand, They act like a lifestyle brand, but they pretty much do zero marketing. And their version of marketing is basically a good product, a unique product that ultimately sells itself through Elon Musk's Twitter account, I suppose. What's your take on that? And so Benton, you had a really good breakdown of that, kind of the anomalies of having a really good product that sells itself and having really, really good marketing that sells maybe an average product. What's the picture that you kind of envision for Tesla if they had good marketing on top of what they already have right now? What is that going to look like?
Well, I think it speaks a lot to the power of a personal brand and the strength of Elon's personal brand. And then, to have world-class, uniquely differentiated and innovative products like Tesla has, it's been able to grow to the point that it has on the strength of those two things. And as recently as a year ago, people were still thinking of Tesla as just another auto manufacturer, and so all the comparisons were to Ford and to GM and that sort of thing. But I think the public has kind of woken up in the last year to the fact that Tesla is much more than an auto manufacturer. Tesla is an energy company and a car company, and several others as well. They're disrupting like a dozen industries all at the same time. And so to your question about, what would happen if they combined, their great products with great marketing. And I think we're going to see that in the next, I would probably say, within 2 to 4 years, you're going to see Tesla adapt a marketing strategy. And the reason for that is because they're going to be moving past their early adopters, and they're going to be moving into kind of that mainstream mass market, and they'll have the product line and the pricing and everything to the point where they can go mass market. And they're going to be talking to customers who are not Elon Musk fanboys, and they're not Tesla fanboys, but instead they're just, everyday consumers who need a car, and they have to make a decision between a Toyota or a Hyundai or whatever. And Tesla is going to need to be getting in front of those people. And so my hope is that, and I suspect they will, I think, knowing that Tesla likes to do things different, knowing that they like to innovate, I doubt you'll see them take the same approach as all the other car companies where they, just kind of put out these generic ads that, you could look at a dozen different ads across the car industry, and you could almost like pull the brand and pull the car out of one ad and stick it in another, and nobody would know the difference, right? It's like, it's that generic. And I'm sure Tesla
as if we're all going off-road trucking and driving through the mud and through the snow and through the mud mountains. I always watch this commercial. I'm like
some kind of a mountain.
I'm like, who's doing that? Sounds fun, but I'm definitely not doing that with my car.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how generic the industry has been. And so I suspect that when Tesla does get into the marketing game, we're going to see them take a vastly different approach. And so, of course, all marketers would love, to have Tesla as a client and love to get to help in that process. And, I'm no different. I'm a huge fan of Tesla, and I'm a huge fan of where they're going. And their stock has treated me very well. And so, I would love to get to help Tesla be innovative in the way that they approach their marketing.
Jason, what would you do if Tesla was a client of yours?
Look, I think you have way more creative space if you're the ones behind the creative, right? In terms of a dream client, I think that is a perfect. If you're making the creative, if you're a Harmon Brothers type agency and you're a creative agency, that's a lot of fun. From a paid media perspective, I mean, look, the bigger brands have a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of red tape, right? So there's, even from a paid media perspective, like there's just so much. I speak to all the people who start off in paid media. They're like, oh, I wish I had Nike as a client. I'm like, no, you don't. You wouldn't. If Nike called you tomorrow, you wouldn't be able to handle them, right? Like you wouldn't be able to do it, right? Like it's just, it wouldn't happen. I like to work with brands who have a proven concept, proof of sales, that have good creative, and their product could sell themselves, and they just need that distribution. They need to be put in front of the right people, and they want to build their brand, and they understand that. To quote a digital marketer reference, like that consumer, their customer value journey. They understand that, they have to walk through different cycles, and they're omnipresent, and they believe in every step matters, and value is created after the transaction. So they're willing to make creative for post transaction just as much as they're willing to create the creative to get the transaction and build a community. Those are the brands I like to work with. They make it very easy for me, which it should be. But at the end of the day, I think paid media, we're not the fire, right? We're the gasoline on the fire. You need to have some sort of fire burning. So many people go to it and think that this is their Hail Mary. I'm going to run a Facebook ad and I'm going to make billions of dollars. Well, no. One is, you probably don't have enough creative to test at that scale to do that, and two, you have no proof of concept. So it's not a sales machine. And I think that's the part that, like we were talking about earlier, that so many brands think of it as, it's my sales force. Facebook, my sales. No, we're not. At the end of the day, if your offer and your products suck, paid media is just going to accelerate the speed at which you're going to fail. That's all good marketing does anyways, right? We'll speed up the rate at which you're going to fail. If your product and service is good, man, like I said, gasoline on the fire, and we'll just get ready for takeoff. But I think that's the biggest mistake people have when it comes to paid media. So in terms of dream brands, yes, obviously there's dream brands I'd love to work with. I mean, like Apple, for example, doesn't care about ROI; they care about impressions. So as a paid media guy, what brand wouldn't I want to work with that judges me on how many people can you show this in front of, and bring that to me? Yes, obviously that's a great brand to work with. But yeah, I think it's just, be careful how people look at paid media.
Amazing. And just a final question for both of you. What's next for your agency? We'll start with Benton and then Jason.
So historically, advertisers used to be able to rely on commercial breaks that came in the middle of entertainment.
Yep.
And that's gone away, right? Netflix, Amazon, all the big streaming platforms, they no longer have these commercial breaks. And so that's forced brands to move over toward, social media, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, your Instagram, that sort of thing. And that's one place where brands can be seen and brands can be heard. But I believe that the next several years is going to put brands and entertainment on a collision course, where you're going to see the brands integrated more deeply and in more meaningful ways right into the entertainment. And I think we're already starting to see that. Like, if you go look at Apple TV Plus and their catalog of shows, any one of those shows that you watch, you're going to find Apple integrated into that content all throughout. They're always going to be on Apple devices and using Apple services and the such. So I think product placement is going to grow like wildfire. I think product placement is already booming. But what we're really interested in at Harmon Brothers is actually like the deeper integration of how does a brand story become part of the entertainment that you're watching. So, going back to that Tesla example, Tesla is a company that's trying to change the world and move the world over to sustainable energy. And SpaceX is a company that's trying to get human life on Mars so that we can be an interplanetary species. And those are like these massively huge goals that those companies have. And imagine all of the ways that you could integrate that brand story into entertainment, through documentaries, through movies, through TV series, all of these different ways. And so at Harmon Brothers, we're trying to find ways to pioneer that. We're actually working on our first television series right now, because we know that branding and entertainment are on a collision course, and we're going to see those integrate in new and innovative ways over the next several years.
Beautiful. I had a conversation with Daniel just recently. Is that Tuttle Twins? Is that the TV show?
Yeah. So Tuttle Twins it was originally a book series for children, right. And it teaches the principles of economics, the principles of freedom. These are principles that like most adults don't even understand, let alone kids. And this book series was written for kids, and it blew up. It went wild. Like they've sold well over 2 million copies. And this has only been around for just a few short years. And so now we are adapting that to become a TV series, which the books are like 90% education and 10% entertainment. We're kind of flipping that. We're going like 90% entertainment and 10% education. And so if you think about, if the Simpsons and Magic School Bus were to have a baby, that's kind of the vibe that we're going for. We want it to be super funny, super entertaining. We want it to be fun for adults, like write the humor in a way that it's intelligent enough for adults. But yet we're going to keep it family friendly, and we're going to keep it educational, kind of like what you get with Magic School Bus. So that's the vibe that we're going for on that.
Beautiful. And Jason, what's next for you?
What's next? We're going to keep doing what we're doing and doing it well. I think the only part that we're really adding now is realizing that there are a lot of brands that may not necessarily need to hire an agency or could afford to hire an agency or shouldn't hire an agency because they're missing all the other key components. So we're launching something called the Market Domination Method, which is going to be like a year-long coaching that's going to help entrepreneurs who are doing around high 5, 6 figures who want to scale a brand but want to understand how to kind of build their own platform and be omnipresent and learn what that means and create a brand and get the authority in their space and use all the tricks that Harmon Brothers teaches, that everyone teaches on how to build a brand. Our goal is really to help 50 entrepreneurs this year, at least 50 entrepreneurs in 2021, be able to scale their brand and not be reliant on heavy agency fees or need to spend millions of dollars on Facebook ads in order to do so. I think there's so much that, like I said in the beginning, and I make my living off paid media, but there's so much more that's in your control that will help every dollar you spend on paid media go even further. And I think people don't focus enough on that. And that's the goal with that. And then keep doing the podcast and keep talking to people like you guys.
Amazing. And Jason, if someone's interested in getting in touch with you about the program, how should they contact you?
You can email me, jason@jportmedia.com, or on all social media platforms, I'm at Jason Portnoy. Very easy to find.
Awesome. And go download Perfectly Mentored podcast. Amazing podcast. And also, we didn't get a chance to talk about From Poop to Go podcast. It's also one of my go-to podcasts that I listen to at a gym. Amazing stuff. I love your interviews as well. Benton, if someone's interested in getting to know a little bit more about what Harmon Brothers, what you guys do and how to get in touch to working with you guys, where should they go to?
Yeah, so if you just want to follow at a distance, follow me on LinkedIn or our podcast, From Poop to Gold. And if you're interested in learning how we do what we do, harmonbrothersuniversity.com, or if you're interested in working with us, harmonbrothers.com. So lots of options, lots of ways to get in touch with us. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the show.
Guys, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the E-commerce Profits Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get notified of future episodes.